child.
He was convicted of the capital murder and sentenced to death for the December 2008 murder of his girlfriend's 13-month-old daughter. Witnesses to the execution were the victim's grandfather and friends of the family, 3 of Milam's family and friends.
My chest, I spoke for Amora, and I spoke for my family, and everything I said came from my heart, and that's all I can say.
Talking to Sheriff Hurdle.
Yes.
You heard the news. When you heard the verdict come down, your thoughts?
What was my thoughts? This part of the phase is over with, okay? And we got one more to go.
How does this feel for the family of Amora? I mean, just knowing the pain they went through and you investigating this, what does this do for you?
Well, I didn't investigate this. I inherited this case. But I've seen it through, and the prosecution's done a great job. Montgomery County, the citizens, the law enforcement, all have done an outstanding job down there.
The room was silent. A mother weeping, a father cold, and a toddler's broken body laying still. The blood-stained walls told a tale that no child should ever endure. In the darkest corners of human depravity, this was a moment that would haunt Texas forever. The truth of what happened inside that trailer took years to uncover, and it's a truth that still feels impossible to comprehend. Viewer discretion is advised. What you're about to hear is deeply disturbing and may not be suitable for all audiences. We ask you to proceed with caution, but understand that justice is often hard to swallow, especially when it's the tragic end of an innocent life. Welcome to The Final Hour, where we dive deep into some of the most chilling and heart-wrenching cases that leave us questioning humanity. Before we begin, I'd like to extend my most heartfelt gratitude to every one of you who has supported this channel, whether through likes, shares, comments, or simply tuning in. Your support has made it possible for us to continue sharing these stories and shedding light on the truth. If you're new here, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. We're grateful for your presence, and we promise to bring you more in-depth cases that will make you think, feel, and question. Now let's dive into a case that shook Texas to its core. A case where the unimaginable became all too real. It was the morning of December 2nd, 2008, in Rusk County, Texas, when the calm of a small, unsuspecting town was shattered by a horrific event that would leave a family torn apart forever. The lifeless body of 13-month-old Amora Carson was discovered under circumstances so brutal that they would make the blood run cold. Her mother, Jessica Carson, and her boyfriend, Blaine Milam, would soon become the prime suspects in one of the most disturbing child abuse cases in the state's history. Amora, just a toddler, had been living in a trailer with her mother and her mother's boyfriend, Blaine Milam, when the unimaginable occurred. On that fateful day, Milam called 911, claiming that he found Amora dead. However, what the authorities uncovered would quickly suggest that this wasn't just a tragic accident, it was the result of sheer brutality. What you will hear next will disturb you, but we must uncover this truth so that justice, in some form, can be served. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of one of the most horrific crimes in Texas history. 18 years old at the time, and Jessica Carson, also 18, gave conflicting statements to law enforcement. Initially, they claimed that Amora had been injured in an accident. Later, the story changed to one where Amora had allegedly eaten insulation from the walls, and at one point they even claimed they performed an inner exorcism on the child, believing she was possessed by a demon. What followed was a long investigation into the tragic events leading to Amora's death, an investigation that would unveil a 30-hour nightmare that no child should ever endure. As the case unraveled, it became clear that this was no accident. It was an act of extreme violence. The crime, one of the most grotesque in Texas history, involved multiple skull fractures, broken limbs, and 24 human bite marks. On the child's small body, Amora had suffered from a blunt force trauma, strangulation, and sexual mutilation as well as repeated and brutal beatings with a hammer. The evidence against Milam was overwhelming, as the forensic pathologist later testified that Amora's injuries were the worst he had ever seen in his career. The investigation took a sharp turn when Milam's sister came forward, revealing that Milam had asked her to remove evidence from under the trailer. When police searched the area, they found a pipe key with traces of Astral Glide lubricant hidden under the trailer, linking Milam even further to the crime. Before that tragic morning, Milam had been in a tumultuous relationship with Carson, and tensions had clearly been escalating. There were hints of abusive behavior towards the child, but no one had intervened in time. What exactly set Milam off that day remains unclear, but one thing is certain. Amora's death was not a spur-of-the-moment event. It had been building for days, if not longer. On that morning in December, Amora's life was violently taken, and it didn't take long for the authorities to realize that what Milam had claimed was far from the truth. The conflicting statements from Milam and Carson, along with damning physical evidence, were enough to lead investigators down a dark path. But even as the investigation pressed forward, both Milam and Carson continued to lie about the events of that day. They insisted the child was possessed, shifting blame and responsibility with each new retelling of the incident. As law enforcement delved deeper, the horrific extent of the crime became apparent. They discovered blood-soaked diapers, baby clothes, and bedding, all tainted with the blood of Amora. DNA analysis confirmed what everyone feared. This child had been brutally murdered in that very home. The response from law enforcement was swift and thorough. Once they discovered the overwhelming evidence, they began collecting everything: blood samples, items of clothing, and even traces of lubricant found under the trailer. The search for answers was relentless, with the investigation revealing more and more chilling details about what had happened during those 30 hours of horror. Milam's behavior after the crime was disturbing. He was calm and seemingly unaffected by the horror of his actions. His false statements were unconvincing and bizarre, making it clear that he was trying to cover his tracks. Milam's attempt to cover up the crime was also evidenced by his request to his sister to remove critical pieces of evidence from under the trailer. As the trial approached, the defense team tried to claim that Milam had an intellectual disability, using the argument that, under Atkins versus Virginia, this would make him ineligible for the death penalty. But the jury rejected this claim, seeing through the defense's attempt to evade responsibility. Following the arrest of Milam, the investigation into Jessica Carson's role in the death of her daughter continued. While Carson was not the direct perpetrator, her role in failing to protect Amora was clear, and she was eventually convicted as an accomplice. As the case proceeded, both Milam and Carson's lives unraveled before the public. Milam had no remorse for his actions, showing little emotion as his fate was sealed in the courtroom. The manhunt for justice was just as intense. As investigators pieced together the story, they uncovered more evidence that pointed to Milam's calculated and chilling actions. During the trial, the horrific details of Amora's suffering were laid bare. The prosecution presented evidence of her injuries, along with testimonies from forensic experts who described in painful detail how the child had been tortured. Milam's cold indifference contrasted sharply with the emotional testimonies of those who knew the child and loved her. The courtroom was filled with tears as Amora's life was remembered. After a long trial, Milam was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. His execution was postponed several times, but the inevitable punishment loomed over him. Jessica Carson, while not responsible for the direct killing of her daughter, was found guilty of injury to a child and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Blaine Milam was finally sentenced to death. After a lengthy legal battle, his appeal attempts were unsuccessful, and after years of waiting, he was executed by lethal injection on September 25, 2025. The murder of Amora Carson left a deep scar on the community of Rusk County. The people of the small town, could hardly believe the extent of the cruelty that had taken place under their noses. Families mourned the loss of a child they never had the chance to protect, and the pain of losing such an innocent life weighed heavily on the hearts of everyone involved. The emotional toll on the Carson and Milam families were immeasurable, and Amora's death became a symbol of the horrors that can unfold when abuse goes unnoticed. What could have prevented this tragedy? How could society have intervened earlier to protect this innocent child? Thank you for watching this heartbreaking story to the end. If you were moved by this case, you will want to hear about the next one. Click on the image showing on your screen now to watch the next story. Stay tuned.